This is how I would learn storytelling if I could start all over. For quick context, over the past 3 years, I've read 34 books on storytelling, listened to thousands of stories, and participated in 12 different storytelling courses. Now, by now, I'd say I know how to tell a pretty decent story. You can actually check out my TED Talk if you want to see me in action. But in hindsight, or looking back, I feel that there's so many things that I would have done very, very differently. To make sure that you don't do the same mistakes that I did, here are the 5 steps on how I would learn storytelling if I could start all over. Step 1, tell tiny stories. When I started on my storytelling journey, I was looking for that perfect story, the one story where my friends would walk up to me and say, "Wow, Philip, this is beautiful, you're so gifted." To be clear, that has never happened yet. What happened instead? Well, by looking for that perfect story, I rarely told any stories. By not telling any stories, I didn't improve my storytelling skills. So if I were to start all over, I would try to share a tiny story every day. Now, where? Well, there is one perfect opportunity for that. Every day, someone asks you, "How are you?" How do most people respond? Well, they say, "I'm great, how are you?" Or, "Oh, I'm fantastic, the sun is out, finally the summer is here." That's how 99% of the people respond. But instead, you could choose to respond with a tiny story about yourself. Something interesting that has happened to you. Something that shows a little bit more about you as a person. Let me give you an example, okay? If someone were to ask me today, "Philip, how are you?" I'd respond like that. I'd say, "Well, I'm really good today. Though yesterday I had this moment of relief. My mom was here over the weekend. And hey, I love my mom more than anything in this life. But when I'm with her, I'm somehow being triggered again of being this grumpy teenager, this rebellious teenager that I used to be. And so anytime I see her, I'm a terrible person." So I was a little bit relieved when she was gone again. Anyway, when was the last time that you saw your family? And yeah, how was that for you? That's where I then would pause and hear the other person out. Did you see what I did there? So someone asked me, "How are you?" And I choose to respond with a tiny story, with something interesting about myself. So next time someone asks you, "How are you?" well, try to respond with that mini story. It's a beautiful exercise that will help you build a connection with anyone and also to start improving on your storytelling skills very quickly. If you think, "Hey, Philip, this is cool, I want to learn more about that concept," well, feel free to check out my free storytelling masterclass. In that masterclass, you'll learn how to build a connection with anyone without ever talking about the weather or the weekend or traffic. Now, you can find the link to the masterclass in the description below. Step 2. Find your stories in your day-to-day. When I started on my storytelling journey, I somehow thought that my stories would need to be about these extreme experiences to be interesting. For example, how I almost died climbing in Rio de Janeiro, how I hitchhiked through Spain without money, or how I had crazy insights doing ayahuasca. Just to be clear, that's not needed. Sure, these stories can be entertaining, but at the end, they're not that relatable. The best storytellers know how to take any moment, even the most boring or average one, and turn it into a beautiful story. Now, how can you do that? How can you start spotting these small, juicy moments? Well, it's by doing an exercise called Homework for Life by Matthew Dix. Now, how does it work? Every single day, you sit down and you ask yourself, if I had to tell a story from today, what would it be? What would be that one moment that stood out? That one moment that touched my heart? The one moment where I maybe realized something? That can be any moment, right? Maybe a conversation, maybe some small realization, maybe some small thing that annoyed you. Anything. And what you do then is you sit down and you write down the date and that one story-worthy moment. So what is in it for you? Well, at the beginning, it may not seem too exciting. Maybe your first entries will be like, today the most exciting thing was that I had cereals for breakfast. Or I was very satisfied after delivering my presentation. That's only at the beginning. But after a few weeks, you will see some beautiful changes. First, you'll have hundreds of story ideas. Every day you collect new ideas that you can start using as a story. Second, you'll be more mindful. You'll walk through life and be like, oh, story-worthy moment, story-worthy moment, story-worthy moment. And third, you'll make meaning out of life. You walk through life and anything that happens, good or bad, that's a beautiful experience that teaches you a lesson. Step 3, watch great storytelling. When I started on my storytelling journey, I had no idea what actually great storytelling looked like. I actually asked a few people and I asked, hey, do you know any good storytellers? And when I asked it, I usually get these very standard responses. They're like, I think Steve Jobs is a great storyteller. Oprah Winfrey is a great storyteller. The Nike commercials, wow, they use great storytelling. But I quickly realized that most people don't know either. For my first few weeks, I just spent countless of hours trying to find any great storytellers until I discovered the one resource that really changed everything for me. That resource is called The Moth. The Moth is this story slam where people like you and like me can share their stories on stage. It's real stories, raw stories, beautiful stories. What I recommend is to check out some of their stories on their YouTube channel. I'll actually link a few of my favorite episodes in the description below. And when you watch these videos, I'd say try to think for yourself, hey, what is something that you liked about the story? What are the elements that they use to enhance the story? And 3, is there something that you would improve about that story? By training your mind a little bit to see what makes great stories, you will have the tools as well to start using these in your own stories as well. Step 4, find a storytelling buddy. To become a great storyteller, you need to put in some work. You gotta sacrifice a little bit of your precious free time to work on something that no one really told you to do so. Now, maybe that's not a problem for you. Maybe you're super self-motivated and you get everything done without procrastination. In my case, it was very different. It was like, I'll just start working on my stories next week. I procrastinated every single week. Well, until one point. At one point, I met 2 guys, Lionel and Antonio. And we talked a little bit, and at one point I realized that they're into storytelling as well. So when I realized that, I asked, hey, you guys like storytelling? I like storytelling. Why don't we share stories together? Luckily said yes. And so from that moment onward, we got together once every 2 weeks to share stories and to give each other feedback on the stories. For me, that, if you want to call it meeting, was a massive motivation, because before every meeting I thought, I don't want them to think that I'm a shitty storyteller, so let me put in some work. So every week I prepared well for that one meeting that we had together. For me, it was huge to advance much quicker in my storytelling skills. So for you, try to find yourself a buddy that wants to join you on that journey. Sure, maybe you have to ask a few people, because at the end, not everyone is into that stuff, but eventually you'll find someone. And once you've found someone, we'll put some recurring time in your calendar. That way it is in the calendar and you will keep doing the work. Again, having a storytelling buddy will help you massively accelerate your storytelling growth. Step 5, commit to a big goal. Over the past few years, I've noticed that my biggest growth comes from one simple principle, and that is commit now, figure it out later. Let me give you an example of that principle. November 2021, I decided that I wanted to try out stand-up comedy. And so I went online and looked for open mic nights in Amsterdam and found one and actually signed up to be a performer there, a stand-up comedian. Back then, I knew nothing about stand-up comedy. I never had taken a course, I never read a book, nothing. But I thought, you know what, I'll figure it out. 3 weeks later, I delivered my first stand-up routine in front of 180 people. That was the most terrifying moment in my life. My legs were just trembling uncontrollably for the entire set. Now, I wish I could say, I absolutely crushed it. No, that wasn't the case. I think I did average at best. But most importantly, I learned so much in the preparation. In the 3 weeks of preparation, I learned more than in an entire year. Now, back to storytelling. Why am I sharing that? Because I wish that I had one of these moments. I had set myself a similar goal for storytelling. So for you, find yourself an ambitious goal that you can commit to. That goal can be to share a story at an open mic night, a storytelling open mic night, to share a story at a wedding, or to share a story at that big presentation in front of your entire company. I'd suggest to pick something ambitious, something that is a little bit scary. I have full trust that you will do everything that it needs to deliver an awesome story. And let's say worst case, you mess up, right? It's a terrible story. But that, my friend, that will give you an even better story to tell in the future. Hey, this is it for today's video, but I'm thinking about recording another video on advanced storytelling techniques. If you think that this would be interesting for you, just quickly leave a comment below with, I don't know, hell yeah, so that I know that this is interesting for you and that I start recording that video. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my channel to get more juicy tips on how to become a better storyteller and speaker. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a fantastic day. Ciao, ciao.